The last presentation actually is not a presentation, it's live coding. Woo. So what will happen now is Tamas Piros, he's technical writer at Mark Logic, and we have a setup, of course, for this. So I'll go to this side. Tamas Piros, like I said, he's technical trainer at Mark Logic, and he will do a live coding session building a single page application with Node.js, NoSQL, and AngularJS. In a few, very shortly, because he needs to stand up in order for live coding. So I think it's very nice at the end to have this session. One. And until he set up that, I just remind you about the feedback. If you want to fill it, you have it on the agenda. You have a number near each presentation, so you can just check the number. Yeah, we are set up. Yeah, Tamas, all good? No? Let's give him some applause. Tamas.
Thank you. Okay, so hello and good afternoon. It's always fun to be the last speaker because I'm the person standing between you guys and the beer. So sorry about that. I will try to be as fast as possible. Now, I also appreciate the fact that you've been through a very busy and long day, so we're going to do a little exercise before I get to my slides. I want you two guys to please stand up. It's not a joke. Stand up in the back. I can see you this side as well. Perfect. Put the laptop aside. You've been sitting all day. Everyone stand up. Cool. Now, I want you to raise your arm a bit above your head like that. Okay. And now, what I would like you to do is, start clapping as loud as you can. Clap your hands. Wait, okay. Okay, thank you. You can sit down. So we did this for two reasons. First one, I'm going to use that picture later on when I do the demonstration. Second of all, I have photographic evidence that I got a standing applause. So thank you. My mom is going to be very proud when I show her this picture. Okay, so on a more serious note, I'm here today to talk to you about single-page applications with NoSQL and JavaScript. And I have prepared about 6 slides for you guys, because I thought you've seen seen more than enough slides for today. And then I'm going to do some live coding. So I'm very, very brave to do that. So let's see if this works. Okay, so my name is Tamas. That's my Twitter handle. That's my portfolio. You can see the code that I write, blog posts, the usual things. So that's not really important. So why would you write single-page applications? That's the first question I'm thinking that you are asking yourself. Single-page applications mean normally that you would use one programming language, and that programming language is normally, especially these days, is JavaScript, of course. And also because you're using single-page applications and you're using JavaScript, you can use JSON as the underlying data structure. And of course, if you think about a 3-tiered architecture where you have a database and you can store JSON documents in your database, then you have a middle tier that works with JavaScript, which will in turn also work with JSON. Then you have a browser tier that would have, normally a JavaScript framework like AngularJS, or you pick whatever you want. That would always work with a JSON data structure as well. So you get the same data type and the same programming language all over the stack, which is, I believe, is a very powerful thing to have. Then in a single-page application, you have a single entry point. So normally you would have an index.html file, you specify that file, and then you specify routing configuration with your JavaScript front end, and you just load the views into your index.html. You just inject those as your routes are changing. And so just to reiterate what I said, so you would have a database, and we're going to have a database as well, but we're going to store JSON documents and some other documents as well, but we will see that when we get there. Then you would talk to a middle tier. And in my example, it's just going to be a very standard Node.js and Express.js setup. You could use a more specific library, such as Happy, for example, if you would want to create a better backend. So I'm going to take the JSON documents out from my database, and I'm going to serve that using Node.js and Express. And then in the browser, I'm going to have AngularJS that is going to consume these endpoints, and it's going to utilize that JSON documents again to create my HTML page. So why NoSQL as well? NoSQL, well, I work for a NoSQL company, that's one thing, right? Second is that the NoSQL technology tries to overcome the limitations posed by the relational database management systems. So go back about 15, 20 years, the data that you had back then wasn't as complex as it is now. So you had some text documents or whatever. Now you would have XML documents, JSON documents, you have audio files, video images, PDF files, Word documents, etc. Coming up with a data schema to load these documents into a relational database is a pain, okay? So NoSQL databases are famous for being schema agnostic. You don't need to specify a schema, just take your documents and you load that into the database. And there are, of course, many NoSQL databases out there, and I work for a company called MarkLogic, so we're going to use that database. And I'm going to prove it to you that it's a very nice database. So what is MarkLogic in just one slide? So MarkLogic is the only enterprise NoSQL database out there. A lot of NoSQL databases have some of our features, but we are the only NoSQL database that have all these features all together. Okay, so we, first of all, support ACID transactions. So we have transactions, you can commit transactions, you can roll back transactions, and we guarantee that the data that you write into the database, if your database shuts down, the data is still going to be there, unlike some other very well-known, and I'm not going to name which NoSQL companies. And you can store any type of document in the MarkLogic database. And if you store JSON documents in our database, we give you access to service-side JavaScript code that you can write inside the MarkLogic server to manipulate these documents. If you work with XML documents, we have support for XQuery. If you work with semantic data, so RDF triples, you can run Sparkle queries against these RDF triples, for example. And as it says on the slide, host of binary types, so you can load in PDF documents, images, so on and so forth. We also have a very interesting feature which is called a relevancy ranked search. So when you do a query inside the database, normally you would say something, select something from table, where, and then you would have a where statement. So search inside MarkLogic works more like a search engine than a standard database where query. So what that means is that when you search for a particular term, we provide you with a relevancy ranked result. So we show you the document that is most relevant to your search, followed by the other documents that come. And I'm going to demo that to you in just a second as well. And we have other features like bitemporality. That's a very big thing in the finance industry. Flexible replication, high availability, disaster recovery, incremental backups, and so on and so forth. And because this is a developer conference, I need to mention that we have a REST API, so you can use a programming language of your choice to access documents in the database, to manage the indexes or manage the database settings. If you're a Java developer, we have a Java API, and of course for Node.js developers, we have a Node.js API as well. Okay, so that was the slides. Now comes the fun bit. So I decided to do some live coding, and I have this wonderful image to show you how much I'm not afraid. Okay, so who's ready? You guys ready to do some live coding? No, I'm going then. Okay. So I'm going to make an assumption, and the assumption is going to be that you have MarkLogic already installed on your laptop. It's really just a matter of going to our website, getting the binary, next, install, finish, and you're done. You just add an admin account as well, and then you're up and running pretty much. And we're going to be using this tool that comes pre-built with the MarkLogic server called the Query Console. So the Query Console is the place where you would explore the content of your database, manipulate some data, test some code, etc. And just to show you the documents as well, so I have some images of Star Wars characters as advertised. So just standard PNG images, and also some JSON documents in another folder that would describe the actual characters. Okay, so some bio and some details. So it's just a standard JSON document. So I'm going to take these documents, and what I have here, can you guys read that in the back? Pardon? Speak louder. Is this better? Okay, I'm trying to shout them. So, what we have here is the Query Console where we allow you to write JavaScript code. And what you see here is a mixture of standard JavaScript mixed with our proprietary JavaScript functions. So for example, you can see it is a standard variable declaration. We have, where is it? You can have standard for each loops. So you can have whatever you have in JavaScript as well, combined with some MarkLogic specific functions, such as this file system directory. So this file system directory goes out to that data folder, and it's going to grab the folders and then the files inside those folders and insert those into the database. So if you note here, if I hit explore, then you see that this database contains 0 documents, right? So this database of mine is empty. And the only thing that I'm going to do is call this xdmp document load function. Now what I would like you to notice, and this is very, very important, I'm not defining how to load the images, and I'm not defining how to load the JSON documents. I'm not making any sort of differentiation. I'm not creating a binary stream of my images and store the binary stream. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just telling the MarkLogic server, this is the file I want in my database, load that in, please. And the other thing that I do, and this is a MarkLogic concept, and I'm not sure whether that's in other NoSQL databases as well, the concept of a URI. So a URI is what uniquely identifies a document inside a MarkLogic database. So you can think of very roughly as a primary key would be in a relational table, right? So something that identifies a document or a row. And then collections is also something that I assign, which I have a variable declaration here. So if the document comes from the JSON folder, I want it to be part of a collection called characters. Otherwise, I want it to be part of a collection called images. So think of collections as you would, thank you very much, because it's really hot. Technical break, thank you. Whew. This you crowd, you're like, whew, making me hot. So, where was I? Collections, yes. So you can think of collections as you would think of tables, right? So all the JSON documents are going to be grouped under the collections called characters, and all the images would be grouped after the images. So what I'm going to do is run this piece of code, wait a bit, I get this message printed, so that's inserted, and now that I hit explore, it's a very small data set, so we have 51 documents inserted into the database, and you can see I have PNG images in here, so if I click on one of them, then this is now inside my database, and if I open a JSON document, then you can see the actual JSON document structure. Okay, so all those documents that you saw from the file system are now inside the database. Images, JSON, everything. And because I talked about search, I prepared a very quick example for you to do some search as well. So we have this function called the CTS search, and I'm looking for a particular term, in this case, the term Luke. I create a standard JavaScript array called items. And because the CTS search function returns a value iterator, I can use this new ES6 for loop, which is the for of. And I take the results variable that I've created, and I push the result into this items array, and I return items. So if I hit run, now I get an array of all the documents that have meshed my search. And the first one is, of course, a document about Luke Skywalker, because the system figured out that this is going to be the most relevant if you search for Luke. And then there are some other documents, so there's about 1, so it's 2, 3, 4, 5 documents that contain the term Luke somewhere either in the description or somewhere in the document. You can, of course, make more complex searches, so I could replace this and say, I would like to have a CTS end query, and that accepts an array of elements, and it's going to be CTS word query where I'm looking for the term Luke, and CTS word query, I'm looking for the term Darth, for example. Okay, so I'm looking for the documents that would contain both the term Luke and Darth. And if I hit run, then you will see that now I only get one single document returned. So this is the only document that contains both Luke, right? It's here, and also somewhere Darth, okay? So that's why I only have this document. You can have, of course, end queries, not queries, all queries, all sorts. If I take this to the next level, just show you something exciting here as well. You can also see the score value. So the score value is what the system automatically calculates to get the relevancy of that document. And I can extract that out from the results. And I'm going to show the actual URI of the document, so the unique identifier of the document. So for that search, I get that score value with this URI. If I change this search back to what it was, then you will see that I get this Luke Skywalker, the JSON document that has the highest score value, and all the others have different, oh well, they have the same but lower score value, so they are less relevant to my search. Okay, so this was one assumption, that we have the database up and running. The second assumption that I have now is, just to save some time, is the fact that you have a very basic Node.js and Express and Angular app boilerplate put together. So what I have here is a very simple app.js file where I define an Express web application server that runs on port 8080. And, sorry, one sec. And I also have public/app.js, which is a very simple Angular module that I created that also defines the root of my application, and it loads this main.html partial, and I have this controller, that should be vm.message, that prints out hello world, and if I go to localhost 8080, this is what I see. So we're going to change this, and we're going to build a single page application. Whew. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do is set up the connectivity to our MarkLogic database. So I have a file called connection.js where I created a connection object, and I'm going to specify the local host where MarkLogic is running. And I've also set up a REST application server inside my MarkLogic system. So on localhost port 5000, I have an HTTP application server running inside my MarkLogic server that connects to this Star Wars database. Okay, so I need to provide the connection details for that. And now the most secure username and password combination ever. So never do this in production. Everyone heard that, right? Because I don't want you to go home and say, oh, this guy on stage used admin, that's fine. Not fine. Okay. So we save that, we have the connection details, then we go back to our app.js. And as I said, MarkLogic comes with a Node.js API package. So we're going to create a variable called MarkLogic, and we're just going to require that package. So this is a standard, if you worked with Node.js before, this is a standard npm package. I already installed the dependencies, so it's just npm install MarkLogic. And then we're going to set up, so we're going to also require the connection. This is the connection.js file, and I'm going to require that connection object that I created, because I need that. And then we're going to connect to the database. And we're going to call MarkLogic create database client, and we will pass in the connection. Then I also need something called a QB. So this is the MarkLogic query builder. This will help us to build queries that would go against the database from Node. So it's called query builder. If I check my console, okay, everything is still green, so far so good. So let's add an endpoint. So first of all, I would like to have an endpoint that goes into my database and just returns all the documents from my database. So let's have a function in here, and let's call it getAllDocuments, which is going to be a standard Express function. So it has a request and a response argument. And in here, we're going to go db.documents.query. So we're going to query the MarkLogic database, and we're going to use the query builder, and we're going to say where the collection is characters. So simply put, this line is going to go into the database, and it's going to retrieve all the documents that belong to this characters collection. In other words, all the JSON documents that I've specified. And by default, we only retrieve 10 documents at a time. That is because, obviously, I have 51 documents in my database now, but in a real-time scenario, we store millions of documents, right? So we want to make sure you don't retrieve all of them at the same time. You can override the pagination settings of per 10 documents per page. So I'm going to override that. I'm going to say I want the first 100 documents to be returned, because I know that I'm safe. Then, once I have a result, this returns a promise. Then I can have my documents, and I can very simply return a JSON response to Express and show all my documents. So if I save this, and I have a tool called Postman, I don't know if you guys use it. It helps me to test my endpoints, but I forgot to do one more thing. I need to register my endpoint, so I say router.root. If someone goes to the /API endpoint of my application with an HTTP method of get, I want the getAllDocuments function to handle that. So now we should be able to test this. So if I go localhost 8080/API, then I go to my database and I get all the, so these are all the documents that I've inserted, okay? And what you see here is the URI of the document, so the unique identifier, some additional metadata, and then there's a content property that contains the actual content of the JSON documents. So let's put this somehow into our HTML. And in order to do that, I'm going to come into the AngularJS file now, and I'm going to remove this hello world message from my main controller, and I'm going to inject $HTTP. So $HTTP is an AngularJS service that allows you to consume various endpoints. And I'm going to say $HTTP.get, please get me the /API endpoint that I've just created, then give me the results, or the result, and then I'm going to set up a variable called vm.characters to be equal to result.data. And I need to say something like vm equals to this. And now all I need to do is go back to the main.html file, delete this message because I just removed that hello world message. I want to create a list item, repeat through the list item for every character in vm.characters. And I want to print out the name, character.content, the name property of these characters. So let's see. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now I have a list of all the characters coming from the database. So let's add some extra thing in here, and we're going to make this a link because I want to go to the character, the URI. So I want someone, if someone clicks to the name, I want them to be redirected to / and then darthvader.json, and that should return me only information about that one single character. Okay, so these should now be links, and I don't know how much you can see, but on the bottom you can see that the link is /c3po.json now. So that's two things that we need to do now, is go back to app.js and write a function that actually goes into the database and reads one single document. So let's do that, and let's call that get one document, and again, request and response. And we're going to use db.documents.read, and I want to pass in a URI, which I'm going to get in just a second. And then once I have a result, then I have my promise, and then I have my document, and I would like to return that document. But where do I get the actual URI from? When I register this route, I can specify a parameter, and I specify a parameter using the colon and then a name. So that means that inside my request, I can access that by calling request.params and then the name that I've specified, which was URI. And then this is again get and get one document. So let's test this as well. Back to Postman /API /darthvader.json. And now I only get this one single document back from the database. Okay, that's what I wanted. So let's hook this up with the front end as well. And I'm going to do a few things here. So I'm going to add another controller that will be called one controller for lack of imagination. And I'm also going to end the route at the Angular end. I'm going to say when someone goes to the /URI endpoint, I would like to have a template loaded for me, which should be partials /1.html, for example. I would like this page to be controlled by one controller. And I just use the controller as Oh, you can actually hear me, but you can't see what I'm... Oh, great. We have sound, yeah. So, the race done. I don't have any jokes. I don't have anything. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare. Anyone know any jokes about programmers? It's back. No, it's not. It's not back, is it? That was a joke. Okay, got it. You know, the funny thing is that the timer is still going. That's not fair, is it? Q&A. I haven't finished. How do you have questions? That's I mean, that's not my desktop, I think. Like, I don't think that's mine. Yes. Why the query language is so ugly? What the MarkLogic query language? Why do you think it's ugly? cts.search is a lot. Oh, you mean in Node, the db.documents.query? I'm sorry, engineering design decision. Does that work? I don't know. It is what it is. I really don't know why it's the way it is.
It is working, yeah. We can take some little questions. Who was here? Yeah?
Is it secure? Yeah. The MarkLogic database itself. So
the connection between the Node.js and the database, also with the AngularJS, is it safe? Can you do it in enterprise level, or is just for?
So what you can do at the enterprise
apps?
level is that. So you remember? Oh, you can't see it. Do you remember that connection object that I created, and it has the host port, user, password? So in there you can pass in SSL support as well. So then you have secure connection between the database and the node, and then between Angular and Node, I don't think you would need that, but maybe you can do it somehow. I'm not sure how, because I've never done that. This is weird to have the questions.
Yeah,
in the
we
middle,
can
but
have questions in between. Other questions about what you saw? No?
No
You
questions?
have one? No? Yeah.
Question there.
So I want to ask Tamas, do you consider that the first requirement using the same language for the front end and for the back end is needed requirement for a single page application, or it was
It's
just
not it's not necessarily a requirement. I just find it very convenient. So I come from a LAMP development background, so I had to learn, PHP, HTML, CSS, bit of JavaScript, bit of Linux, bit of MySQL, bit of everything, right? So now I can get away by knowing one programming language, and I just find that convenient. And I'm not saying that that's one way of doing it, because as I said, we have. Oh, that's me. I'm trying to see myself. It's never going to work. I'm sorry. What was I saying? So you could have a backend written in any language, because we have this REST API in the first place, right? And then you can, run it on a PHP, communicate with the MarkLogic server, and then have Angular on the front end, or have Backbone Ember. It's really up to you. Not yet. Okay.
Play. Other questions?
Why is it working there?
I don't know.
I need to talk to that guy after this.
Yeah, maybe. But other question about what you saw, like Angular or NoSQL. Yeah.
Do you have an API for PHP as well?
No.
Just
simple answer, no.
okay.
So
Just
only the REST API. So REST
Okay.
API, as I said, could be used from any programming language that is capable of making stateless HTTP requests, which PHP can, And then proper APIs is the Java and the Node.js API.
Okay. So how is it better than CouchDB?
How the database is better than CouchDB?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know much about CouchDB, but is CouchDB ACID compliant? Yes.
Yeah.
Does it have relevance rank search?
Yeah.
Does it have built-in security?
I
Stop
don't know what that
embarrassing me.
means, but yeah.
But yeah. So, for example, in MarkLogic you can, code. Okay. So in MarkLogic you can specify what your users can see, what documents they can update, what permissions you're giving them, so you can give them read permissions, update permissions, so you can control all of this, and I don't think CouchDB can do that, in all fairness. So for example, also with the URIs that I've loaded in, so can I show it now? Okay, so you remember these URIs that I loaded in? You could load these in saying something like /character/Luke Skywalker, and for the images, /image name. And then you could set up a permission that says a user with a particular role can only create documents in the /characters URI space. So you can lock this down at a very granular level. Right.
Okay, let's continue.
Let's
because
continue.
now we have the theme.
So I added getOneDocument function that returns one document, and we wanted to hook this up with one controller. I created partials, and now I need to create the actual controller, right? So function one controller. I need again $HTTP, and I'm going to use root params because I want to access the root parameters from the URL. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say URI is root params.params.uri. Is it root param or root params? Params, that's what I thought as well. Okay. And you see here, this is the parameter that I'm calling, so that's why root params.uri. And all I need to do is again go out and get /API/ and I already forgot what the endpoint was. So /API followed by the URI, and then function result, and I'm going to create a character variable, character, and that's going to be result.data now. And now I need to create this an HTML file, which was 1.html. So I'm going to go in here, partials 1.html, and in here, very simply, I just want to have an h1 tag, and I want to say vm.character.content.name. Just save that, and let's see this in action and make sure that this works. So click on that. Oh, here we go. Problems. So let's see, vm.character.content.name. vm.character result. Let's just have a look at some debugging as well, just to see what's happening. So if I refresh this, let's see what we get. Someone's shouting probably the right answer. The route is not containing the API. Wait. Data 0. That's the one. Thank you. Because I only get one document back. Thank you. So, okay, so now that should work, right? Okay, so we get the name, and let's also print out the actual biography. So vm.character.content.bio was the property. Okay, and if I click on someone else, then we get the bio for that one person. So don't forget that we also loaded images, right? So it would be nice if I would get the character information and the image for that character. So all I need to do is modify this getOneDocument statement a bit, and I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to add object.com. I'm going to add a property, and I'm just going to store the whole return document there, and I'm going to make another call and read the actual content.binary. So I forgot to mention this to you, so apologies. So when I hit explore, and if I open a JSON document, you will see that there's a property called binary that links this JSON document to the image that is about this character. Okay, so I can make another call, and result. Then I have my promise. And I can call something like object.content is equal to result.data. Now the problem with this, and then instead of returning the JSON document, I need to return the whole object. And the problem with this is that we store, so if I would just console log result.data for the binary image, then I would get a bunch of hexadecimal values. So what I need to do, I need to make sure that I pass this data in a format that I can recreate the image in HTML. So I'm going to call new buffer result.data. Oh, hang on. Let's just see what's happening without that. So if I do a refresh, what am I forgetting? Results data. By the way, I have the code working in another place, so I can just copy paste. I prepared. So let's just do this anyway. Data, and it's going to be binary, and I want this to be a base 64 encoded string, because that's what I can use to rebuild the image using the data URIs on my, in the front end. And now, because I changed what I'm returning this object, it means that I also need to update this piece of code here. So if I just console log the result, you will see that it's different from what it used to be before. There we go. Okay, because I lost time, I'm just going to copy some code, okay? So just ignore this bit. You see how many backups I have? 4. Let's see what I'm looking for. I'm looking for app.js. So I'm just going to copy that. No, hang on. Backup app.js. So I'm just going to copy that part where I read the document. So I'm just going to get all of this and replace that with this. I'm not saying anything. Patience, people. Okay, so now that should work. And now I can, so if I refresh this, now I should get some valid data. Okay, so now I pass in the object. It has a data that has the content, and look at that binary string, okay? So now I need to rework this app.js, the Angular bit a bit. And I have to say, okay, I would like to get, so if I do it this way, you can see or you can't see what's happening. So I'm going to get the result.data.content0. And I'm also going to create vm.character.image, for example, which is result.data.binary. And now, if I refresh this, I have everything what I had before, and now I can add an image. And I need to rebuild my image using this data URI. So I need to say data, it's a PNG image, it's base 64 encoded, and it's character, so it's vm.character, and I'm at the wrong file, aren't I? Hang on. So character, no, vm.character.image. So theoretically, okay, so I have the image, right, of the character as well. Please, thank you. Okay. So now, what I can do is, I'm also going to add search, just to show you, because I talked about search and I still have, that actually stopped now. Cool, thank you. I have unlimited time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add one more function in here that's going to execute some search. So I'm going to say variable search equals function, request and response. I'm going to get a term which is going to be coming from the params again. And I'm going to say db.documents.query. And I'm going to query where the collection is again characters. And I'm going to use this parsed from, and I'm going to pass in that term. So that is actually going to be very special, because this parsed form will understand what we call the mark logic search grammar. So if you pass in the AND keyword, we'll do an AND search. If you pass in an OR keyword, we do an OR search, and I don't need to do anything. It will just work. And I'm going to say slice 1 and 100 again, and then result, then function, and now we have my documents, and then I'm going to send those documents back as a result. Still works. It does. So let's go back to main.html. I'm going to add a very simple form in here. And on ng submit, I'm going to call vm.search. And I'm going to add a text box with a model of vm.search term, for example. And I'm going to add an input button with a value search. What, of course, I missed was to register this endpoint, this search endpoint. So I'm going to say router.root/API search followed by the term should be handled by the search function I've created. Okay. So back to this main controller, because I placed that form onto the main.html file, I have to define this search function inside my main controller equals to function. And I'm going to say very simply if vm.search term, so if the search term exists, then I would like to say http:/get/API/search followed by the search term, and then function result vm.characters equals to result. So if I've done my job right, and if I go back to the main page of the application, I have this search, and now I can do the same. I can say Luke. Of course I'm missing something. What am I missing? What am I missing? Oh, yeah. Tough life, huh? Result.data. That's what I'm missing. So let's do this again. Luke. I want to give this up right now. Okay, so let me copy public app.js. I'm just going to copy the function, which does look exactly the same, right? I have to go back to the HTML, someone said that. The model in my HTML so there's so many people talking. Yes. That should work, right? Should. Like everything else should have worked, right? Okay, so now I have searched for these documents. Thank you, thank you. I don't know who else helped, thank you. And what I said, if I do and Darth, this is now automatically going to understand that and keyword. And if I do something like or, now we get a lot more documents. If I do something like Luke, but not, so that's the not symbol, then I get nothing. Ignore that. Sorry, no, it's not there. It should work. Okay, so this tried to prove that it's relatively simple to put together a single page application, but I prepared with a full-blown application that, if you don't mind, I will show it to you in a few seconds. So we have, I think it should be still running, so localhost 4000, and we have this application called GeoPhoto. And it has some geospatial capabilities, so we load it in images, and because those images have latitude and longitude values, I can plot those images on map, on Google Map. I can have a look at the images. I can go in and I can have a look at the image and some description. So this is a nice image. I can save that, and that's immediately updating the JSON document in the database. And I also get some semantic information about the country where I took that picture. So the semantic information is automatically collected by the server and stored as an RDF triple. So I get stuff like the flag, where that country is, currency, area, and the description of the actual country. And I have some geospatial search capabilities as well. So what I have is a circle, and I can say, okay, are there any pictures that I took in Colombia? So I just define that, and there are that many pictures. I can move this around, and that would re-execute my search. So these are the pictures that I took in Europe that are in between the, or inside that circle that I drew. But what I would like you to notice is that, well, there are no pictures from Romania, unfortunately. But I just took one, right? So, hopefully, I have that picture. Oh, look at that. That's so nice. So we're going to take this picture. I'm going to export that to my desktop real quick. Okay, so export that. And I'm going to use this to here, which is the import script that comes with this geophoto application. Now, if you're interested in ES6, that import script has actually been written in ES6 and been compiled using Babel or Babel, I don't know how to pronounce that, into ES5. So all I need to do now is say node import.js and specify the path for that file. So that's users desktop, and I think it's EMG 25. So that's going to now go and do a reverse geolookup. It will tell me where that picture was taken, insert the document into the database that describes the image, insert the image into the database, do some semantic information search on the place where I took that picture, store that in the database, and if I refresh this, now I have a picture in Romania, and that's the picture in fact. So let's update that and say the most patient crowd ever. Save that. I also get this map tab, so is that right? That looks okay to me location-wise. And just to show you text search as well, and if I search for crowd, I immediately get back this document that I created. And before I finish, okay, live coding, we've been through that. One more thing, that was the one more thing. I wanted to do the Apple joke, but I think you're all thirsty. Resources, so MarkLogic, please go ahead and try it. All our trainings that we do are for free. All the character search and a bit more advanced version of that is available on GitHub. Here's a link. Geophoto is on GitHub as well. And I will say this out loud, mulțumesc, and thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Tamas.
Do we have time for questions?
Maybe 1, 2.
Okay, 1, 2, 1.
I saw that you're using promises or something like that in your Node.js application, but kind of the database calls, for example, they tend to get to the pyramid of doom thing, you know?
Yeah.
Have you or are you using any flow control solution for these asynchronous operations that basically require information from the previous one?
Yes, so the actual import script that I was mentioning, if I can find that real quick here. So as I said, it's written in ES6, so let's open the ES6 source for a second. And if you look at, is it here? Okay, so in import ES6 actually uses this ES6 promise library. Sorry, you can't see it probably. Is that large enough? This one. And as you can see, what I do, because the import script itself does a lot of things. So first of all, it's only looking for JPEG images, right? Then we have to make sure that the extension is correct, and then all these functions, this process import function, then would chain these then statements, right? So first you get try to extract the GPS data out from the image. When you get the GPS data, we get the model information, because that's also something that I'm actually displaying, right? And all of these are just chained together using the standard then statements. Now in terms of other control flow, so the, what's the library that we use? So the actual MarkLogic Node.js client API uses Bluebird implementation of promises. And because I wasn't involved in writing that library itself, I don't know what control mechanisms they use in there. I can tell you that this is how I do it in my code that I wrote, but it uses the Node.js client API.
Okay,
maybe that was one question there in the back.
One quick, and then...
one quick, yes,
yeah,
I'm
very quick.
going.
Hi, so you showed us that you have that relevance search for look or doth.
I'm sorry, I showed that I had
the search based on the term,
yes.
right? Is there any way that you can configure that?
Yes, so there's, because I used the function parsed from that parse from accepts the Markov search grammar. But if I would just use qb.term or qb.word query, then you would have to specify your search logic. So, and there are, trust me, zillions of options. So for example, this geosearch uses, you know, the geospatial circles, geospatial points, so there are geospatial searches, and there are a lot of options for text searches. You can, for example, for XML documents, so you can do a search against a JSON property only. For XML documents, you can do a search against an attribute value that belongs to certain elements, and you can become crazy with all the searches that you can do. He was asking about the relevance.
Oh, yeah.
When we establish the score, so the score value is done by an algorithm that the system is calculating, and then you have the options to order your documents according to score, reverse that order your documents by the URI, so you have other options as well.
Can you set the weight
of the fields? Yes, you can. So you can say, okay, yes, you can.
So I think it was very nice. Do you come to the party? Are you coming to the party?
No.
Afterwards?
Yeah, of course I will. Of course I will.
So he will be at the Bereria Hash, starting with 8. So
Star
you
Wars
can ask
t-shirt.
more questions there.
Can't miss it.
So big applause for Tamas. I think it was great.
Thank you.
I thank you too for being patient and being all day here. It was nice to see you, or some of you second year, or some of you new. I hope we'll meet again the third year here. Don't forget about the feedback. There will be a lottery and some prizes. If you submit the feedback, based on the feedback, you receive the people who are winning will receive an email. So if you leave your feedback when you go out toward the Bereria Hash, because we'll meet there at 8. Don't forget your badge. Thank you a lot. Have a great day or night. Thank you.
Who wants the chocolate?